Right now, you probably have a schedule. You have a job, or a class, or a list of things you are supposed to be doing. You have a phone in your pocket buzzing at you. You have places to be, deadlines to hit, and an alarm that goes off whether you are ready for it or not. You feel busy, maybe exhausted, maybe like there is never enough time. But here is the thing. For almost all of human history, your ancestors had none of that. And what they actually did with their days is so different from what you imagine that it will make you question everything you think you know about work, rest, and what it means to be human. The image most people carry of prehistoric life is one of constant struggle. Hunting mammoths, running from predators, desperately clawing food out of the earth from sunrise to sunset. That image is wrong. It is almost entirely wrong. And the evidence that dismantles it has been sitting in plain sight for decades. In the 1960s, anthropologist Marshall Sahlins looked at the data on modern hunter-gatherer societies, groups whose way of life most closely mirrors the lives of your ancestors, and reached a conclusion that shocked the academic world. He called hunter-gatherers the original affluent society. Not because they had money, not because they had abundance in the modern sense, but because they got everything they needed in remarkably little time. Sahlins found that the Kungsan people of the Kalahari, studied in the field by Richard Lee, spent an average of just 3 to 5 hours a day on what you would call work. Then they stopped. The rest of the time, they talked, they slept, they played. They sat around doing what looked from the outside like nothing at all. 3 to 5 hours. Let that settle for a moment. Your ancestors were not workaholics. They were not obsessed with productivity. They were not optimizing. They were human, in a way that the modern world has largely forgotten. But what exactly were those 3 to 5 hours made of? That is where it gets genuinely strange. Foraging was the core of the workday, not farming. Farming had not been invented yet. Your ancestors gathered plants, roots, tubers, berries, nuts, and fruits. They hunted, though hunting was less central to the diet than most people assume. Studies of modern forager groups consistently show that plant foods make up the vast majority of calories, sometimes as much as 70 to 80%. The stereotype of the mighty hunter dragging home a kill every day is, for most of human prehistory, a myth. A successful hunt might happen a few times a week, or a few times a month, depending on the environment. In between, life went on without it. When your ancestor went out to gather food, they were not wandering aimlessly. They held an encyclopedic knowledge of the landscape around them. Anthropologist Robin Wall Kimmerer has written extensively about how indigenous plant knowledge systems rival modern botanical science in their depth and precision. Your ancestor knew which roots were edible in which season, which plants were toxic, which bark could treat a wound, where the water sources were, and how they shifted across the dry season. That knowledge was not written down. It was held in the body, passed through story, through song, through watching elders and doing the work yourself. Walking through the landscape was not just travel. It was reading a text that took a lifetime to understand. And then often by midday, the work was done. What happened after that? This is the part that will feel almost impossible to believe from where you are sitting right now. After the food gathering was finished, after the fire was tended and the camp was in order, your ancestors rested. Deeply, extensively, without guilt. Anthropologist David Sampson has studied sleep patterns in modern forager societies and found that they do not sleep the way you sleep. You likely have one long sleep at night, often broken up by stress, artificial light, and the buzzing of that phone you put face down on the nightstand. Your ancestors slept in 2 phases, a long sleep at night, and then a shorter afternoon rest that Sampson describes as consistent across groups. They were not lazy. They were physiologically doing what a human body is actually designed to do when it is not fighting artificial schedules. Then came the socializing. This was not downtime in the trivial sense. This was the engine that kept the whole system running. Evolutionary anthropologist Robin Dunbar, famous for his work on what is now called Dunbar's number, has argued that language itself evolved primarily as a form of social grooming. Apes maintain social bonds through physical grooming, picking through each other's fur, managing parasites, building trust through touch. But as human group sizes grew, physical grooming could not scale. You cannot groom 50 people at once. Language, Dunbar argues, solved that problem. Talking was, and still is, one of the most evolutionarily important things a human being can do. So your ancestors sat around the fire and they talked. They gossiped. Gossip sounds trivial, but Dunbar's research shows it makes up roughly 65% of human conversation across cultures, and it is not idle chatter. It is information sharing about who can be trusted, who violated a social norm, who helped whom and who did not. It is the social operating system running quietly in the background. It is how your ancestor kept a map of every relationship in their group, and groups that managed those maps well survived. They also told stories. Cave paintings at Lascaux in France, dating to around 17,000 years ago, are among the most studied artifacts of prehistoric life. But beyond painting, your ancestors were oral storytellers of extraordinary complexity. Anthropologist David Lewis Williams has spent decades studying the cognitive architecture that produced cave art, arguing that the images are tied to states of altered consciousness, to dreams, to spiritual experience, to narrative. Stories were not entertainment in the thin modern sense. They were archives. They stored ecological knowledge, moral frameworks, cosmologies, instructions for living. The story of how the heron always fishes in the shallow bend of the river was not just a story. It was a map, a lesson, and a memory aid all at once. And there was play. Not just for children. Adults played too. Games, music, dance. The oldest known musical instruments are bone flutes discovered at sites in Germany, dated to over 40,000 years ago. Your ancestor made music. That means they practiced. That means music was not a hobby saved for weekends, but something woven into the daily texture of life. The line between work and play, which feels so rigid and important to you, barely existed for them. Craft occupied a portion of each day as well. Flint knapping, the art of shaping stone tools, required years to master and looked nothing like casual production. Archaeologists have found evidence of preferred stone sources located hundreds of miles from where the tools were eventually used, suggesting trade networks and deliberate choices about materials. Your ancestor was not just smashing rocks together. They were selecting, traveling, negotiating, and creating with intention. They made clothing from hides and plant fibers. They made baskets, nets, cordage, containers. They made art, whether functional or not, because humans make things. It is what you are built to do. There was also childcare, which was shared in ways that would look radically different to modern eyes. The model of two parents raising children in an isolated household is extraordinarily new. Evolutionary biologist Sarah Blaffer Hrdy has argued, compellingly and with decades of supporting evidence, that humans evolved as cooperative breeders. The village was not a metaphor. It was a biological necessity. Grandmothers, aunts, uncles, older siblings, unrelated community members who were emotionally invested in a child's survival, this was the system that made human childhood possible. Human children take longer to develop than any other primate. That vulnerability only makes sense if many hands were reliably available to help carry it. The loneliness of raising children in a modern nuclear family is not how your biology was designed to work. So the full picture of a prehistoric day looks something like this. Wake with the light. Forage for a few hours, walking, observing, conversating, using a mind that has been mapped to the landscape for years. Return to camp. Rest, socialize, tell stories, work on a tool or a piece of clothing. Play with children, cook over fire, sleep in 2 phases aligned to the darkness, and do it again. No inbox, no commute, no performance review. No weekend that exists primarily to recover from the week. Now here's the part that should feel like cold water on your face. Your brain was built by those millions of years of that life, not by the last few hundred years of this one. The anxiety you feel at rest, the guilt you experience when you are not being productive, the longing for deeper connection with people around you. The way your best ideas seem to arrive not when you are grinding at your desk, but when you are in the shower or walking outside. None of that is weakness. None of that is a malfunction. That is your ancient mind pressing its nose against the glass of the modern world, looking for the thing it was actually designed for. Tonight, when you feel the pull to put down the screen and do nothing for a while, to talk to someone without an agenda, to sit outside and watch the light change, listen to it. That impulse is not laziness. It is 300,000 years of human wisdom asking to be heard. Your ancestors would not have understood your schedule, but they would have recognized that feeling immediately.